Hello.
Hello.
If you like this podcast, tell an influencer. That'd really help. Help us get a review in some press. Help people hear that it's good from people whose opinion they trust. That would be great. What have you got a promotion?
Yes, I'm going to promote the brightonnaturalhealthcentre.org.uk, a Brighton-based charity that offers well-being classes based around movement and things and exercise. That's going to be opening next week, reopening on the 25th of July. And in the meantime, has lots of Zoom classes available for you to be feeling well about.
Wunderbar. If you want to improve your life using data, come and find me at goodtohear.co.uk and sign up for my mailing list. And I write lots of things, and you get a free book called Tracking Happiness, and you get to see all sorts of ideas about just organising yourself into just making everything brilliant. How about that? goodtohear.co.uk/free.
Whoa.
Hello and welcome to Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast, a weekly chat between two very professional speaking DJ types. What do you call it? Radio journalists. My name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Magic.
Radio journalist extraordinaire.
I don't think we are those things.
Journalists have to look stuff up. Journalists have to look stuff up, don't they?
A weekly... yeah.
Look, we cite references.
We do, yes. We have references. Okay, yes, all right. Moving on. This
week, I just had not thought of how I was going to describe the podcast. I mean, ideally, we would just have a canned description of the podcast we'd use every week. But I'm committed to this, 133 episodes in, still trying to make up something each week to describe the podcast, such that it can never catch on because no one knows how to describe it. So we keep changing it. Awesome. This week, we're going to talk about individualism through a lens of sort of talking about libertarianism, personal responsibility, contrast with, like socialism and communism and that kind of thing, thinking about other people, valuing the group over the individual versus neoliberalism's valuing of the individual, valuing and blaming the individual over the institutions or the society. What with all these new COVID cases in the US suddenly appearing because of this libertarian attitude everyone's got, which is, basically selfishness.
Well, don't give away your opinion in the intro, Michael. Why would people listen? We both came to this episode with thoughts on the same topic, but from different angles. Mine was this headline of 70,000 new COVID cases in America yesterday. And then I watched a video in the week of some people walking around Florida giving out masks and the responses they got from people, which were wildly aggressive. Also, here they've made it once again necessary to wear masks in public spaces because they had, not in public spaces, inside public spaces, not outside. But they had loosened the mask rules, and obviously the cases were going up. So we now have to wear our masks again. Everybody has to wear a mask, and frankly, I feel much more comfortable being in places. It's very uncomfortable with wishy-washy rules, Frank. I feel very uncomfortable. I feel much more comfortable. I had to go to the police station to pick something up, and everybody was wearing a mask, and the people behind the counter could very easily say to somebody, please go outside, there are too many people inside, wait outside, there's only 2 people allowed. It was just clear, and it makes you feel safer, I think.
Yes, exactly. I had a haircut this week, and the guy wore gloves, but he didn't wear a fucking mask. And I didn't give him he's a guy that's been cutting my hair for years. And I didn't want to, and I think I might have been the first person he's cut his hair for a while. because it was like the first appointment on the first day that I'd seen he was back. But still, I just kind of thought like...
Yeah, it's like... Yeah, anyway.
I was holding this mask on I was like awkwardly trying to kind of hold it on while still allowing him access to like...
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, like we're getting the rules here that everyone's got to do it soon, aren't we?
Yeah.
In the UK. So finally, and it's you just like we could have saved ourselves a lot of heartache if we'd just done this in the first place, like South Korea and places like that. Anyway, that's yes. We'll get into it. I've been thinking about personal responsibility, and I think that's quite a complicated subject as well. So hopefully we can get into that too. Anyway, here's the music. How was your week, Ivanka? How's it going?
I've had a good week. We did have a night. Nick woke up in the middle of the night with a very painful eye. So painful that we had to go to A&E. Because he's been welding, and despite being as careful as he can be, he's got arc eye, they call it, which is where you kind of burn your cornea. So he was in a lot of pain at 2:00 in the morning, and I phoned the emergency services number here in Croatia. Here they sort of like you go, hello, my husband's in pain, what can I do? And they go, I'll put you through to a doctor, in a very uninterested way. They put me through to a doctor, and she goes, well, someone's going to have to look at his eye. You're going to have to go to A&E. Okay, thanks, bye. So then I had to phone a neighbour to come and sit in the house. Well, she's a neighbour, and we'll call her an auntie type person because I've known her my whole life. But I phoned her up at 2:00 in the morning and said, can you come round and sit in the house so we don't have to wake the child up while we go to A&E? So we did, and she very kindly came round. We got in a car, went, and this is an island that is not very populated. So obviously we rocked up. We had our masks on. Nick went in. They put some anaesthetic in his eye and washed it, and then told him to go and see the eye specialist tomorrow. Luckily for us, Thursday is the day that eye specialist visits the island. That's very convenient. This is Wednesday night. Thursday morning, got up, went to see the eye specialist, who was very reassuring. She checked him out. She also said, well, why are you here? Looks like you've got a bit of infection, blah, blah, blah. Gave him some stuff. And what I enjoyed really about the whole experience was her calmness, authority, because I think I may have complained before about how doctors in Croatia behave like gods because they're treated like gods. And this has, not all of them are so rude. Many of them don't, they treat you as an eyeball or a nose or whatever rather than as a person. She was very nice, but also we were in the waiting room and there was an old man with his mask under his nose. Yeah. And she just looked at him and went, mask on nose, mask on nose, mask on nose, mask on nose. Until she said, if you don't have it on your nose, it doesn't work. Mask on. And he kept going, but. And she's going, mask on. It's a beautiful thing. I loved it. It was like delivered with such calm authority. She was also 6'5" or something. So she had this advantage of being huge and very authoritative. So I enjoyed that.
So he's okay. He's going to be okay.
He's okay. He's going to be okay. No, nothing's fallen out. Nothing's. But he's just got to.
He's going to have one eye,
not
one
go
ear.
hell for leather. Yeah, exactly.
One leg.
This is the thing. It's like exactly. It's like for a man with only one working ear, you'd think you'd take a bit more care of his eyes. Anyway, but yes, this also got me thinking, which I will ask you how you are in a moment.
That's okay.
I will. Got me thinking as well about this sort of, this way we are conditioned by modern consumerism and everything. It's just to keep pushing through, ploughing through. Like, when we're talking about fiacca and working through the heat and working through the sun and just creating more protection, when actually, like, if something hurts, just fucking stop. Don't support it. Just sit down, relax. Anyway, how's your week, Michael?
My week's been good. I made a change on Sunday. I thought I'm going to start grinding for mortgage money or whatever, for buying house money. So one of the effects of that was that I finally ran the numbers on my gym membership and thought that's a lot. And they were calling me to talk about reopening this week, and it didn't sound like it was going to be the same anyway. And I've been sort of like doing it on my own I've been forced to do all this stuff on my own for a couple of months now, and I'm feeling relatively confident about it. So I thought, yeah, which is really sad. I did feel very sad about it, but because it was sort of my only social, like recurring social situation as well. But yeah, like everything now, it's not really going to be the same anyway. There's not going to be, they're not going to be having big gatherings or things like that. So until we get this, vaccine, hopefully before the next pandemic emerges, COVID-21 emerges. So that happened, and also I had a haircut. So yeah, and I mentioned that already. So that's exciting.
Right, transformational week.
Indeed. Let's talk about the subject. Where should we start? Should we start with libertarianism versus what is the opposite of libertarianism? Not being selfish?
Well, libertarianism, some of my best friends are libertarian. Some people I admire would class themselves as libertarians. And for certain things or certain elements of life, I think libertarianism is cool. Like if you want to, I don't know, paint yourself a funny colour or make your hair, I don't know, do
live
stuff
off
that
the
doesn't
grid,
affect
like
other.
live on a boat.
Live off the grid,
don't do
stuff.
the same thing everyone else is doing. Like that's okay.
Yeah, that's cool. But I think but then there's certain things that are impossible to separate from other people, and for those there has to be some form of regulation. And we've got all this talk now of defund the police and all this stuff about, I don't know whether I hadn't thought about this ahead of recording, but it is that sort of like, we do need regulation. And in the light of, I think COVID makes it really apparent that there is a need for regulation, because there is absolutely nowhere to hide. There is no scenario in which you can protect yourself unless everybody is protecting themselves. And by that, when I say everybody and you, I mean every country, every town, every village, every continent. You cannot separate yourself away from these things. And that, it's just very visceral and visible that it needs to be done in a collective way.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, there's no way other interpretation.
Yeah, I would say in terms of libertarianism, it's sort of like you've got to have a moral code with that you are thinking about other people. Like if you're just out for yourself and don't care about anyone else, that's not libertarianism, that's just selfishness. No. Libertarianism is because so often the rule and often the rules are wrong. Often the state is trying to do stuff that it shouldn't be doing. I think like clarity is really important around those rules, especially when it comes to a pandemic. But when it's like wrong rules that are really strictly enforced, that's what we're sort of reacting against with libertarianism. And, once you get into sort of like drugs, the hard line, zero tolerance on drugs, as long as you're black, like that kind of attitude, that's where we see, that's why people become libertarian. That's why people sort of reject the state as an idea. So the state needs to, find its level and take responsibility for the stuff that it's, the collective stuff that wouldn't otherwise happen. The latest Intercept podcast that had Rutger Bregman on it talking to Mehdi Hassan. So that was a fun conversation. And he was sort of like, Rutger's sort of like quite not happy about Steven Pinker's sort of outlook on things, and he sort of like Steven Pinker sort of like leans into the Hobbes Leviathan, the state is needed, otherwise people just sort of murder each other, which I've said this on this podcast and I thought it was quite persuasive. Rutger's the fact that most people are pretty good did manifest itself in sort of prehistoric societies, and it's sort of the problem. He says the problems started coming in with farming and settling down and all that kind of thing. But I guess I'll need to read his new book and see how it affects my thinking about all this stuff in terms of the sort of gradual improvement to how lives are lived under sort of authority and institutions that are sort of an artifact of the modern world in many ways. But I'd have to see his stuff, because I think it's hard to say that ancient Egypt enslaving lots and lots of people, America enslaving lots of people, who's got the strongest army sort of sets the rules. It means a lot of people don't get to be human beings. So I'm not sure about all that. But having the right rules and also having enough ability to sort of like adapt to the situation as it evolves, rather than if it takes you a year to implement some rules, say that face masks are mandatory, then that's too slow.
Yeah, I think that there's there's a fun, going back to your Rutger Bregman for a minute, or Bregman, Christian posted a thing on Instagram this week, and I'll read it because I think it's relevant. It's a picture of a bit of a book, and he says. It says, "This is a book about a radical idea, an idea that's long been known to make rulers nervous, an idea denied by religious and ideologies, ignored by the news media and erased from the annals of world history. At the same time, it's an idea that's legitimised by virtually every branch of science, one that's corroborated by evolution and confirmed by everyday life. An idea so intrinsic to human nature that it goes unnoticed and gets overlooked. If only we had the courage to take it more seriously. It's an idea that might just start a revolution, turn society on its head, because once you grasp what it really means, it's nothing less than a mind-bending drug that ensures you'll never look at the world the same again." So what is this radical idea?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
That most people deep down are pretty decent. And it's the book is Humankind: A Hopeful History, but and I haven't started reading the book, but that's the same thing that Kate Raworth talks about in Donut Economics. She talks about the fact that we've been sold this idea that we're all pitted against each other, and we've talked about this. I always go back to this, your games theory that cooperation is long term much more beneficial than competition, and I think there's something. There are some, yes, of course, in some instances on a micro level, have a game of chess, be better than your friend, get together regularly and, beat each other at pub quizzes, but walk home together, share a cab, do you know what I mean? It's like and cooperation wouldn't feel so good if they,
that's why it feels good. And like getting into a fight does not feel good. Like getting angry at someone doesn't feel good. Being afraid of someone doesn't. Like these things don't feel good because that's feelings are. The feelings are sort of what we are. Like we're programmed to sort of react in different ways to different situations, and we like the ones where everyone's getting along because that's just nicer. I mean, just better.
It is, and I think that the masks are a wonderful visible thing at the moment of all the things that we do as individuals that are selfish and aren't beneficial broadly to society. We've suddenly got this badge on our faces that is like this is what it looks like when we're all trying to survive something together.
Yeah. Reporting peas. Maybe we can just jump into personal responsibility, because I think I just want to unpick this with you really. Like a conservative perspective is on personal responsibility is that people shouldn't blame other people for their own. Like they should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps and like figure it out, and people will get painted. People that aren't doing very well will get painted as not trying hard enough. And I think like conservatism, it almost entirely rejects the institutional responsibility, the role of institutions and the role of the state in the achievements of the individual. And we've got this belief, this mass hallucination that, and with sort of examples to back it up, like we love the stories of someone who pulled themselves out of nowhere and succeeded in this. And you can only do that in America. You can only do that in a sort of like neoliberal society. Like money is the great equalizer. Everyone can succeed. You just have to work hard. And people that whinge about the situation just aren't taking enough personal responsibility. And if they took personal responsibility for their own progress, then they would be fine. But like, there's just, and I sort of, on the one hand, I don't want to say like, if you're having problems, blame, institutional racism for everything, because probably one or two things you could probably do something about. But I think sort of conservatives want to reject that entire the idea that there's any impact of the institutions on individuals. And the same with like Mark Fisher's treatise on like mental health is like we look at it as an individual problem instead of as a societal problem. So we say, oh, this individual is mentally ill, rather than this individual is living in a society, the same society we're all living in, which has a lot of problems. They just like reacted to it in a more extreme way. But we just want to say, no, well, that's an isolated case of mental illness. And everyone else is fine, even though no one's fine. Everyone struggles with things in different ways.
So one of the things I've been doing recently is deliberately seeking out sort of all my Kindle reading material and everything, like my fiction, my everything. I'm trying to find black authors. It's one of my little, personal, what can I do to be better? I'll do this. And I've been reading this novel, and the protagonist is a black woman working in it's called Queenie. I'm not finished it yet, and it's just a novel. But like, it's kind of every line reminds you of how much further a black woman has to step up than I have to step up.
Yeah.
Like how much bigger that first step is. And it goes, and I personally, I understand that I have privilege in certain aspects of my life, and nobody who talks about Black Lives Matter wants to downplay that life can be hard if you're a white person, if you're a white woman. Like we can all have trickinesses in our life, or challenges. Trickiness trivializes, so I'm not, but I appreciate my privilege in that when I walk in a room, I am white, I'm fair, I've got blue eyes, blah. There's certain things certain assumptions that are made of me that might not be made or aren't made of a black woman. Now, but then I also know quite a few people in my life whose parents are incredibly wealthy. And so they can do things like get £700,000 bridging loans to buy the house that they want. Or I know a few people like that. And I talked to Nick about it recently, because somebody we know is starting a business, and their whole approach is one that neither Nick or I would ever have taken. And I think and we were boiling it down to the fact that we know what it's like to not have enough. And so there's a fear associated with that, or a lack of, and we've talked about this 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways, is like, you can't take personal responsibility for something that you don't have. Like I cannot approach opening a business or being brave. Some people can, because they have an inherent bravery, perhaps.
Or they've got nothing to lose, maybe.
Or nihilism. I don't know where bravery and nihilism come together. At some point it's like, well, I've got nothing to lose, I might as well give it a go. But for those of us that maybe and I find it hard not to be envious. Those, there are feelings in me that I don't like, or I don't acknowledge their successes as much. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's easy. Like, this is a thing in the back of my brain that sits there where I'm like, well, well done. Like, mummy and daddy lent you loads of money, did they? And it's very, very hard for me to not be a child.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the shit someone would get if they tried a crazy business idea from a sort of position of poverty and then failed.
Totally.
The they'd get for that if they, well, you did, that was just a bad idea, that was a stupid,
That was
and you go,
stupid.
This guy that is a billionaire that you think is brilliant did 10 of these before he did the one that was successful, so how dare you?
Exactly.
And we don't
It's
see,
like,
and the problem with privilege is we just don't see the barriers that aren't
have
ahead of us. It's like really hard to imagine, and it's hard to kind of identify privilege from a position of privilege. So all you can do is sort of pay attention to people that don't have it and go, oh, right, yeah. And what's that Pulp song?
But the personal responsibility thing and privilege, I think, are so closely related as to be quite hard to separate because I can't remember it may even be been talking to you on podcasts, I don't know, but I've been recently having a conversation with somebody about the fact that when it comes to mental health, you cannot know how somebody else is reacting to a situation. You cannot know what brought them to being more adversely affected by some event than you. You cannot know what their experience was that's made them more sensitive to a thing, that's made them, and it's not a weakness, it's not a lack of personal ability, it's just who they are and the series of their experiences that made them a person who gets very angry about a particular thing or gets very sad about a particular thing. And to judge them, I find
tempting, but
it's tempting. Of course it is. We all, it's very hard not to be judgmental, I think. Yeah. It's quite a natural, but then even the judgment comes from it's like a competition, isn't it? I've done better than you. Or I can see how you could do better.
And that's the core of a lot of this. If you set everyone up as competitors with each other, what kind of society does that create? It creates a world where everyone is encouraged to look for ways to one up each other and pull one over on each other and buy all the toilet paper. Yeah,
totally.
It absolutely is,
so many shocking examples recently, but then it settled back down, people, but I'm sure people got told, we've been taught through the media and through the current politics and competition and consumerism to behave like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's deeply ingrained, this idea that if you run out of toilet paper, that's your fault. That's basically the society we're living in, where individualism is prized over sort of collective responsibility. I saw this comedian. Let's sort of kick this around for a bit. I saw this sort of comedian talking about how she'd sort of moved from Russia to America and as a child, I think, but sort of older. But she talked about taking an exam and how in America everyone was sort of protecting their answers and you sort of not allowed to look at anyone else's thing and you've got to just figure it out. And she was saying it was weird to her because in Russia, if someone's having a problem with the exam, someone else, people help each other because they've got more of a, maybe it was China, but where in a country that values the society over the individual, I thought that was a nice sort of how it manifests. Sort of is.
Well, I mean, I'll give you. Well, so in Yugoslavia in school, and I think this has remained true now in Croatia in school, is you have a class of children who are the same age and in the same year. They are of whatever ability that particular net has cast. So there's not the stream. So there's not the people that doing what do you call the higher maths people, the people doing GCSE mid-level or whatever. There's no everybody's together and everybody's doing the same. I found it unbelievable that when I came to England that you could do that. People could be given a different exam paper. So the people who weren't expected to get more than a C were given a paper on which you couldn't get more than a C. It's weird, isn't it? It's so weird. So weird. So weird. Whereas in Yugoslavian school, it was different. Everyone's in the same class. There's no concept of it. We did have a couple of classes where you would be doing extra maths, but that wasn't core. That was like an extra little club thing. It wasn't core to your finishing school. And so you could be nourished more if you were talented at a particular thing. But in class, everyone was there the same. But the teachers would also berate you as a class, and the leagues were at a class level. So if like somebody in class was on the board answering questions and they were rubbish, we'd all be whispering. Because we didn't want to be the worst class. We wanted to be the best class. Yeah. And I mean, I remember doing like dictations for English, because we used to have to, I learned English as a foreign language. As you can tell, that wasn't such a big challenge for me. So I'd be sitting there in the dictation going, for head, like spelling out all the dictation so that all the people sitting near me knew what to write without having, like, I think that's quite I recognise that, but I think it's partly as well to do with this, like, there is only one education. There is no private school option. Everybody's in the same class because they happen to be born the same year in the same town, not because they're cleverer or deemed to be cleverer when they sat a test on a particular day or whatever it would be. Yeah. And it creates a different vibe for sure. That's not to say that Croats and Yugoslavs aren't competitive and horrible to each other, as history has shown repeatedly, but it does at a school level, it creates a different vibe for sure.
This makes me think about like when I did my leadership training, and they talked about like where the sort of team. Some teams will be more sort of teamy, and some will be sort of a bit more individualistic. And one of the problems with sort of everyone being in it for the team is you get these things like no one feels like they can go home until the last person has gone home, and that like I resent. The way I work isn't the same as the way the next person works. So why should I feel like I have to stay until, 9:00 just because some other people are still there? Oh, you can't go home before the boss is gone. Like that kind of attitude. I really hate that. And I suppose that's where my libertarianism, where my individualism sort of starts to flare up. Yeah. Because I can't deal with it. Like I've gone from being in a band to being a solo artist, partly because it was just really hard to reconcile my goals with the goals of other people. And like people wanted to sort of like spread, like divide. It's all that where you got to say what percentage of a song you wrote and what percentage of the song the other person wrote. And you start like breaking that down, and it gets really like, that gets unpleasant. And my philosophy is, if I do work with other people, I'm not going to play that game. It's going to be like, well, we evenly split whatever's there, because I just hate this idea that we've got to sort of like start accounting for the value of your work over my work over like we'll track time, and we'll make sure that when we track time that we take into account thinking and things that maybe you're not specifically typing. But that whole thing, it can be difficult to find ways of like fairly working with other people from the ground. Certainly that's been my experience. Like and usually I've ended up just like losing the relationship because I couldn't figure out how to reconcile the cooperation. But
I think in a weird way, I'd sort of say that sort of working together, like your example of, people staying late because everyone on the team, they don't want to be the one that lets down the team and goes home early. But a good team should recognise that people have different challenges. But it's kind of like there are certain things in life that are so intrinsically connected to other people that I think they should be treated as this cooperation, like education, like healthcare, like road construction, like power supply, like all these kind of stuff, like masks.
Do you know what I saw today? They're redoing our pavements. It's quite exciting. They're putting some nice, like, light coloured, like solid. It's going to look like one of those posh streets, I reckon, or maybe a little bit nicer anyway. But like, we just looked out the window this morning, and there was this road surfacing vehicle driving, and it was like a private company's road surfacing vehicle. I'm like, if the state is not doesn't want to own road surfacing equipment. What the hell is going on? Like, you're definitely not going to need road surfacing equipment. That's something you've got to pay the private sector for. I was just like, that really gets my frickin' socialism heckles up. But please continue.
All I was going to say was that some things are shared societal responsibility, and then you can have your little competition about who wrote more of a song, if that's how you want to do your working relationship, or if you want to be good at running races, or you want to be a billionaire. But like I don't understand how we can. There are a couple of such major challenges in the world at the moment that I don't know how we can. I don't know how individuals can survive them unless we all survive them.
Well, yeah, it's making climate change and recycling an individual problem. Like that's kind of another way in which this way of thinking fails us. We've just got to not use plastic straws, or maybe we should have regulation on pumping out, tons and tons
oil.
And tons of carbon unnecessarily into the atmosphere. Like that's where, like the state is that this attitude permeates into the places where it really should not.
I mean, we can't even get our shit together to ban plastic straws. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is still going. I mean, I don't know, but you know what I mean. Like, we recognise, but it's a thing where it's up to us to go into a bar and say no to a straw rather than the straws to just not be there.
Yeah, and also like to sort of blame the individual for problems is to deny the sort of like people like to sort of do the same thing everyone else is doing. People feel more comfortable. Is if you know that wearing a mask is the right thing, but everyone else is like not bothering, you feel self-conscious about wearing a mask, and like that is. Yeah.
I think that's a whole different. It's like, I pick up rubbish, for example. If I walk past something in the street and pick it up, I'll just go, I'll fucking put it in the bin. And then you get to a point where I now don't give any fucks, I just do it. But it actually takes a time, or walking on a beach. Like, I'll pick up rubbish off a beach if there's no one on the beach. But I've only just started recently getting brave. And it is brave. I don't want to be the weirdo that wears a mask and picks up rubbish and everyone thinks he's a weirdo, though I think people already think I'm a weirdo, so I just need to embrace the weirdo. But like that there is that sort of, unless it's mandated, unless it's I just think
it's like school uniform or that kind of thing. Like it's just better. Some stuff you're not just fighting against like what's the scientific advice, what's the right thing to do. You're also fighting against this human instinct not to sort of stand out too much. And unless you say, here are the rules, so everyone can go, well, it's the rules. I have to wear this uniform. I have to wear this mask. Then like people aren't very good at sort of like going against the grain of society to do the right thing. Like,
no.
And we do. And that's why we do make those people heroes. But we for some things, we shouldn't be relying on heroes. We should just be...
just be like,
come instituting it.
Yeah.
Two anecdotes relating to personal responsibility based around my flat. I put a small amount of leftovers in a plastic pot in the fridge, and it's been 2 weeks, and I'm scared to open the pot now. I keep forgetting to put it out in the bin. And Charles was like, should we just throw the pot away? And I was like, we can't. Ivanka will murder us. It's only a little pot. We could just throw the pot away. But the other one is that yesterday morning, like because of they are doing our pavement, they've made little sort of paths, protected like railed off pathways to our doors. So it's sort of like quite a narrow thing, and with those plastic sort of weighted down things, so you have to sort of walk around and down. But yesterday I sort of came around and down, and there was just like a dead mouse in the middle of the very narrow constrained path, and I was like, I'm just going to just ride past that and get on with my day and hope someone else deals with it. And then I was thinking, well, who's going to deal with it? Whose responsibility is that? Hope maybe the workmen will take responsibility for it, or maybe it's going to fall to some kind person, or maybe it's going to be like so many dog turds and people are just going to step in it until it turns into a sort of like bony smear and dried up sort of bony, furry... Sorry, I'm going to
I think your mouse metaphor is a good one. You know, that's it. Like, who's going to pick up the mouse?
Who's going to pick up the dead mouse from the pavement that everyone's got to use it? I mean, it was weird because it was a sort of like not that many people were going to be using this bit of pavement because it was sort of our private path to like. So there was only about 3 or 4. I was thinking, Christ, and because if it was like if there was more people, then I wouldn't have probably even thought about it because I was like, well, someone's going to do something about it, because I knew there was that more limited group of people. It suddenly got me thinking. So there you go. Like when you're aware of too many other people, and you stuff does, someone will deal with it sooner. Even living in a house with loads of other children, it was a bit easy to go, I'm just going to slack off a bit because there's just too many people. Like, or like worried, paranoid that people are going to think I've slacked off. Or like, you know, if there's too many people in a building and someone does not have good toilet brush etiquette, they can get away with it because there's too many people. So, yeah, you know...
I think it's easier to be lazy or easier to behave badly on a...
Which is why China has this surveillance state thing.
But I think what I think about all this personal responsibility versus individualism and it ultimately is that societal responsibility doesn't replace personal responsibility. All of us can take personal responsibility, but the things that we can take personal responsibility for, and that's cool, but they are not mutually exclusive.
It's not either or. That's brilliant. That's a great breakthrough. Next time I'm talking to someone that is saying, oh, but personal responsibility, I'm saying, yes, personal responsibility and state support and a safety net. Imagine that. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying don't be responsible. Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting thing that I hadn't thought of.
No,
there we go.
Glad we have this chat. We should do it again.
Right. Thanks for listening. Yes. If you like the podcast, there is a patreon.com/grandpodcast. You can subscribe, grandpodcast.com. Where can people find you, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
Find me at Michael Forrest on Twitter. And drop us an email, hello@grandpodcast.com if you want. If you don't want, that's fine too.
Always nice to hear from people.
Do whatever you like. Yeah. It's your life. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
See you next week. Bye. 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 Bye.